Heidi from the Spools and Bobbins sewing studio here in beautiful Fall River, Nova Scotia, and with me today is Laura, and she will be learning the burlap tote bag. For this tote, we used regular brown burlap material, a lovely thick 100% cotton broadcloth lining, and some iron-on interfacing and 2 small plastic covered magnetic fasteners. To begin making our burlap tote project, measure off and cut 2 pieces each of burlap, 2 pieces of lining, and 2 pieces of interfacing, all 15-inch squares for the front and back of the tote. Once this is done, and in order to have a flat bottom tote, you will need to cut out the corners of both the front and back of each piece of material. Make the cut a 2-inch by 2-inch square for each of the bottom corners. Then cut 2 straps from the burlap plus 2 straps from the interfacing. This ensures long-lasting straps from everyday use. And both the straps of the interfacing and the burlap need to measure 22 inches long by 4 inches wide. With your interfacing lined up with each piece of burlap, gently iron the interfacing, shiny side to the fabric, with medium heat to the burlap front, back, and straps. Just take note, do not use any steam for ironing the interfacing onto the fabric because it'll prevent it from sticking. Pin both your burlap and your lining inside out. And with a 1/2-inch seam allowance, you will now need to sew both side seams and bottom seams of the burlap interfaced back and front, as well as your lining back and front. The lining is sewn together separate from the burlap and then inserted into the tote once you are ready to put the whole thing together. So once you've sewn the one side of your lining, we've sewn the left-hand side here, then we're ready to sew the right-hand side. But before you sew that, you need to measure the lining up against your burlap, the outside of your burlap bag. Because when you're ready to sew the very top of the bag, then the 2 measurements might be slightly off. So what we're going to do is we have tucked the inside lining into the burlap tote, and we're going to pull the edge that we've sewn right up against the edge of the burlap bag. So just pull it up nice and tight against it. And then we're going to pull the other side nice and tight up against the sewn side of the burlap part. And we're going to pinch the seam in the exact area, in the exact measurement, where it needs to be sewn, so that we have a perfect size lining for the outside of the bag. So that's right about here. And we just make sure that we mark that spot with the first pin. And it doesn't have to be the same all the way down. Obviously you're going to want to keep it fairly straight, but what you're going to want to do is make sure that you start exactly at the top, because there's going to be a folded out part here where the seam is going to make all the difference up against the burlap bag, because that's the part that's going to be sewn to the bag. Once you've finished sewing the sides up with the 1/2-inch seam, you'll want to zigzag all your edges to make sure that none of the material frays. Okay, so we have our sewn burlap bag, and now we're going to make the corners. So you're going to take your 2-inch by 2-inch squared off corner, and you're going to pull them in together so that the side seam, which is right here, the side seam of the bag, and the bottom seam or fold, I kept mine folded so I didn't sew a seam. They're going to come together and they're going to meet right in the middle like that. So you'll have 1 inch on one side and 1 inch on the other side. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance right along that corner, and it's going to make the corner of your bag. This will form the squared bottom of the tote. Follow this procedure with the lining part of the tote. Okay, so what we have is the outer burlap shell. So we're going to put that right side facing out. So make sure that the bottom of the squared off part is nice and straight, so that your bag sits nicely like that. And then we've also got the lining part, And that also has the squared off bottoms, thanks to Laura. And what we're going to do is we're going to place the lining part of the tote inside the burlap part of the tote. But we don't want to turn this right side out because we want to see the pretty side facing us on the inside of the tote. So we just keep it inside out and we tuck it into the top part of the tote like that, all the way down into the bottom, and just push your squared off corners into the bottom of the tote. And so you've got your basic tote all ready there. And the next step is going to be to fold 1/2 inch of your burlap bag into the inside of your tote, like that, 1/2 inch. And then you're going to take 1/2 inch of the lining and you're going to fold that in between the lining and the burlap bag so that it sits like that. And then you're going to pin the lining to the burlap bag just so that the lining part sits just slightly lower than the burlap bag part, probably like literally 2 millimeters. And you're just going to start doing that all the way around the bag, and you're going to pin it. And the sides in as well, so you'll go straight down the side seam, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch to 1 inch. It depends on how high you want your bag to sit. Your side seam of your lining will match up with your side seam of your burlap. And then we'll flip the bag around again and we'll do the same on this side. So basically we'll have 4 sides of the bag pinned, just so that we get a general sense of where we want everything to be pinned and sewn together. So you've got the basic bag all set up. Now the lining should sit exactly inside your burlap, because when you start sewing it, you don't want your lining to be bigger than the burlap part, or it's going to ripple and it's going to look flawed. But Laura did a really great job on sewing that and measuring it, and it all looks perfect.
Next, take your straps and iron down a 1/4 inch fold along both sides of each strap. Fold each strap together, creating a crease through the middle length of the strap, and pin. Using a heavy-duty needle in your sewing machine, sew as close to the edge as possible all the way down the burlap strap. Sew over each end just to reinforce for later.
Alright, so we're going to take our straps and we're going to pin those into the bag. And where we're going to pin them is between the lining and the burlap, the outside of the burlap bag. And you'll want to be looking at your side seam and measure approximately 1 inch inward. And you're going to measure your strap 1 inch, and you're going to tuck your strap about 1 inch down, maybe not quite, in between your lining and your burlap, and you're going to line that up all nice and straight like that, and you're just going to stick a pin right in there. Okay, so that's pinned in place. Now the same strap is going to be pinned on the same side of your bag. We use our side seam as the measuring gauge, and about 1 inch, and your strap's going to be about 1 inch down inside your bag, so it's going to fall between the burlap and the lining. And you're just going to take another pin and you're going to pin your strap into your bag. And then you're going to do the exact same with the other side. Now you've got 2 seams on these straps, and the seam of the first strap that's already inserted into the tote is facing outward. So you're going to take your other strap and you're going to face that seam the same way. I just think that it looks good like that, but you can do whatever you think looks good too. And then again, measure about 1 inch from the side seam and tuck your strap down in between the burlap and the lining, and place another pin in there to hold it in place. And then you're going to just loop it around again and bring it in between your 2 pieces of material again, about 1 inch down, and just place another pin in there. Okay? So the bag looks finished, but there's one more important thing that we need to do before we sew it all together, and that is to place our 2 magnets inside the bag so that we have a fastener so that we can close the bag when we don't want the contents to be seen or spilled out or whatever. So you need to make sure that when you insert the magnets into the bag that the two opposite poles are facing, otherwise they're going to repel each other. Anyways, oh, maybe it doesn't. Oh yes, it does repel. Okay, so we've got two perfect magnets here. We're going to take the first magnet, and you can see that the magnet is stuck inside two pieces of plastic, so it's completely sealed, and you can just easily sew right over top of that piece of plastic. So we're going to take one of our pins out, the middle pin again, and we're going to take that magnet and we're going to place it. Can you see this? Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to place it right in between the seam, like where we're going to be sewing this overlapped part. It's sort of like the casing. So you want to make sure that you have the magnet placed exactly right halfway between the two straps. And you're going to want to have the magnet nice and tight up against that top fold. So you want to feel your plastic right in that top fold there. If you don't, then you're going to miss it when you sew the two fabrics together, because when you sew this bag together, you want the seam to be at the very top of the bag. Okay, so I can feel the magnet in there, and I can feel the plastic right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to stick it in the side. Obviously the pin's not going to go through the magnet, so you got to stick it beside the magnet and make it go through the plastic plus the lining plus the burlap. So just make sure that your magnet is stuck in there really, really well, because if it slips, it'll just fall right out of your bag, and you'll have to take all your sewing out from the top seam and redo it. So we're going to do the same with the other side. This is actually the hardest part of the whole bag. It takes a little bit of practice and finicky moving around, so just be patient. So you've got your whole bag together now, and you can see it's all together, and all you need to do now is sew it up. So let's do that, Laura. Woo! Beginning at one side of the bag, now you will sew the entire tote together with a seam very close to the upper edge of the tote. This bag is spot cleanable, and you may adjust the sizes and make larger or smaller sized totes with canvas, jean, heavy cottons, or other beautiful fabrics of your choice. Stay tuned for more fun-filled tutorials from Spools and Bobbins, and visit us at www.spoolsandbobbins.com. Okay, alright.
Is that just your audio?
Okay. How can I do it funny? I want to be funny.
Stay tuned for more fun-filled tutorials from Spools and Bobbins, and visit us at www.spoolsandbobbins.com.
Hilarious. You don't look like much of a sewer, but
Yeah,
that's
I'm
okay.
not.
I just did the funniest smile I can tell.